1979, brought us the American legal drama, Kramer versus Kramer. It was directed by Robert Benton and based on a novel by Avery Corman. In the starring roles, you'll find Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep, supported by Jane Alexander and the young Justin Henry. Hoffman plays the up-and-coming New York advertising executive Ted Kramer, and he believes that his responsibility to his family is to be the household breadwinner, making his primary focus in life his career. Joanna Kramer, played by Meryl Streep, is his wife of 8 years, and she's left to play the role of housewife and mother to their 5.5-year-old son, Billy. Joanna, on the encouragement of Margaret Phelps, a recent divorcee that lives in the same apartment building with them, and one of Joanna's primary confidants, decides to abandon the marriage and leave Billy with Ted. She felt like that in her current fragile mental state, he was better off being with his father. Ted's feelings that Joanna is just going through a phase and that she'll return home in a day or two, but she doesn't. Ted has to make some major adjustments to his life. He's required to fit Joanna's motherly duties into his busy work schedule, and he's really ill-equipped to take on the household chores and the act of being Billy's sole caregiver. Ted and the young boy go through a very difficult period, learning how to deal with each other as father and son. But the relationship eventually blossoms into a truly loving one, with Margaret being one of their biggest supporters. There are just two things that threaten father and son's newfound family happiness. The first being the effect that being Billy's primary caregiver has on his productive work life, and the second being the arrival 15 months later of the newly confident Joanna, who wants custody of her son back. The strength of these performances by the two leads can be in part attributed to what was going on in their private lives at the time. Dustin Hoffman was in the midst of a messy divorce, while Meryl Streep was still recovering from the death of her lover, John Cazale. Now, initially, this film could look totally different, especially on the female side. Kate Jackson was originally thought to be the character of Joanna, the role that Meryl Streep plays in the film. And Meryl Streep was originally cast as Ted's one-night stand, which eventually was played by JoBeth Williams. When Kate Jackson was unable to be in the film, the role of Joanna was offered to Meryl Streep. Now, the little boy, played by Justin Henry, does an exceptional job in some pretty tough scenes. It's said that Dustin Hoffman would work with him extensively on each scene, discussing everything at length with him to put him at ease. Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep would often, jokingly, try to get the youngster to pick one of them over the other. One day on the set, Hoffman asked him who he'd rather be with. He responded saying, "I want to be with her. She's nicer." To which Hoffman replied, "Oh yeah? Try working with her for 5 weeks and see what you say." The set director found out that they were planning on decorating Billy's room with Disney figures. He objected strongly to this. It had nothing to do with the lighting or the camera work, but he felt that it would be very intrusive. He thought it would be like inviting a third character into the scenes between the child, mother, and father. He suggested to him to paint clouds on the walls instead. The director loved that idea, and that's what they ran with. The famous scene where Hoffman and Streep are in the restaurant together was filmed at J.G. Mellon's on East 74th Street and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. A framed still from the film hangs on the wall next to the table where that scene was shot. Meryl Streep was pregnant during the filming of the movie, and towards the end of the movie, she had blossomed out pretty good size. That's the reason you always see her in a raincoat at that point in the film. Hoffman's one-night stand in the film could have been slightly different. That part was actually offered to Joan London, who was a news reporter at that time. She really toyed with the idea of doing it, but once she found out there was a little nudity in it, she declined to be in the film. This movie wouldn't be half as good or as intriguing if the movie had taken sides. It's a movie about a situation rich in opportunities for choosing up sides. You've got a divorce, a custody fight over a child. But what really matters in this story isn't who's right or who's wrong. It's if the people involved are able to behave according to their own better nature. As we mentioned just a few minutes ago, JoBeth Williams went on to do the one-night stand part. She was a prim and proper Texas beauty, and she was terribly hesitant about taking her clothes off in the scene where she's standing in front of little Justin Henry. She was afraid that her nudity would traumatize the little boy. She had visions that he might spend the rest of his life with a psychiatrist. As it turned out, the little boy took one look, yawned, and went on with the scene. This allowed the scene to play out with perfection, and she knew that she hadn't affected the child in any way. Many people somewhat saw this film as an unofficial sequel to The Graduate. Some have said that they even considered casting Catherine Ross, who played Elaine from The Graduate, in the role of Joanne Kramer. This connection seems like somewhat of a stretch to me. The last scene of the movie, where Joanna asks how she looks, and Ted replies to her, "Terrific," wasn't in the script at all. It was a moment that actually happened between the two actors as they were preparing for this scene off screen. The director observed it and decided that it would be a great addition to the movie. Now, one note that I find somewhat humorous is that Meryl Streep, when she was attending the governor's ball held at the 52nd Annual Academy Awards, she had to go to the restroom. In doing so, she took her Best Actress award, the Oscar, that she had won for the movie, into the ladies' room with her. Problem was, when she exited, she left it there. She eventually realized the mistake and went back and nabbed it. Now, the entire film, there was terrible tension between Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep. Hoffman at times felt like he was being upstaged by this newcomer as the production was filmed. At a few points in the film, Streep would try to change the dialogue, especially in the restaurant meeting scene. Hoffman came unglued. He was furious. Looking back on it, he says that he hated her guts during this filming. And he really did treat her terribly while on the set. Being a method actor, he would do everything he could to raise her reactions as they would film a scene. And believe me, he had no barriers. He would say anything, even going to the point of whispering her dead boyfriend's name to get a reaction from her. The famous scene in the restaurant where he busts a wine glass against the wall was something that he planned all along. And he actually slapped her in this scene just to get a reaction. Meryl Streep felt like he really crossed the line when he did this. When he threw the glass against the wall, he was the only person other than the cameraman that knew he was going to do that. The reaction that you see from Meryl Streep is real. She's completely shocked by the act. She had glass in her hair after this, and she started yelling and screaming at Hoffman as soon as the shot was over for scaring her so badly. There's some pretty bad things that have been said about Dustin Hoffman in the past few years, and Meryl Streep seems to support some of these without going into detail. The one thing we do know is that their relationship while filming the movie was a pretty intense one. The movie was a major critical and commercial success, grossing over $173 million on an $8 million budget, making it the highest-grossing film of 1979. It explores the psychology and the fallout of divorce and touches on prevailing social issues. If you haven't seen it in a while, take another look at it. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.